Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure, and I have to say, to some extent, it's a very pleasant surprise when I give this kind of talks about markets. It's very rare to find an audience like this, in which you see nature markets scale as the core of the topic. In fact, my job is actually to be talking about markets, trying to convince that scale is important and that as part of scale, nature has a major role to play. So, thank you to our hosts here in Singapore for making it that easy, and to Martin for opening the presentation. So, I usually start these conversations with a variation of these two graphs, because they set the scene in which we are. And first message is that while the conversation was a bit taboo, like 5-6 years ago, now it's clear that we will overshoot. There is not a question of whether maybe we will save ourselves from that. No, we will overshoot. The question is how bad it will be. And at the moment, really, I would say it's almost anybody's guess how bad it will be. But it could be really, really bad. We had COP in Brazil last year. And by that time, I remember publishing in LinkedIn articles by a Brazilian expert, probably one of the persons that knows most about the Amazon. And he was reporting that things that really 15 years ago, I remember reading and taking them as a bit of science fiction. Well, actually, you were seeing signals of that. And that was really, really worrying. And that was the possibility, it is a possibility, that the Amazon ecosystem, at some point in the next 40 years, 50 years, could tip irreversibly into a savanna and releasing an amount of carbon that basically is game over, okay? If that were to happen, well, there is not really much we can do, probably nothing, to avoid a very, very, very dangerous overshoot. So basically the message was that, and this is not the only ecosystem, I'm still in the graph on the left, that's not the only example of a very dangerous tipping point. But since we had COP in Brazil, like, not long ago, is one that comes easily to mind. So, first message is that we will overshoot, no doubt about it. Second is that we are betting the house in the next 40 years. I mean, really what we do probably will determine the kind of world that, well, my children, definitely my grandchildren, will see. The graph on the right, that one over there, that is the amount of emission reductions that we should do under different scenarios. So, in the y-axis, you basically have gigatons. On the x-axis, that's a time series up to 2100. So, just to put some things into scale. For example, this part here from 0 to 13, those are the emissions of China at the moment. China. If we were to do things really, really well until 2050, suddenly, then what you see at the bottom, this is the amount of removals that we should undertake. So we do everything perfect we really do the homework, comes 2040, 2050, and this is about what we need to remove. I'm not even talking about emission reductions, okay? Those were done. And yet, we need to get CO2 out of the atmosphere. Last week, in the United States, we were going to see the biggest technology-based CDR plant starting operations. It had to be postponed, it had a technical glitch. They will solve that. That plant, every year, again, the biggest, will remove, when working, 500,000 tons per year. 500,000 tons. And that's the biggest, because whatever is left, all the other plants are in the order of 10,000 tons, 15,000 tons. You know, a good one may get to 20. This amount of removals by 2050 is about 2 gigatons. 2 gigatons, for comparison purposes, is more than what the European ETS trade every year. So, taking this plant as an example of a big plant, you would need to multiply that by 4,000 in the best scenario to remove what you need to remove to avoid an overshooting. I am really, by genetic design, an optimistic person, but I see it really difficult that you can really achieve that level of removals without nature. So, that is the other big message. When we say we need nature not to overshoot, and we don't really want to overshoot badly because it can be really, really bad, if you need to defend that, you know, reason will be with you. It's really true. So let's move forward now. And this is just something that we found. We wanted to show it as a day-to-day impact. Singapore in 2024 has 122, you know, half the days, a third of the days in the whole year, in which you had a level of exposure to heat you don't want to have. And Asia, for some reason, not to go over it now, is heating up at way over the rate of the rest of the world. So we saw a bit about nature. Now I want to move into markets. And the use of carbon pricing mechanism is growing. That's why, as UNEP, we are interested in it. Again, it is the scale now what matters to us. And there you have some statistics. More than 80 emission trading mechanisms, a third of the global emissions. It was 5% at the beginning of this century. So it has been adding about 5% of the global emissions every 5 years. A third is not bad. And in terms of revenues, not gross income, is about $100 billion now. Just to make a comparison, 100 billion is about the money that the World Bank lends in a year. Or if we want to get something that is closer to home, it's anything between 3 and 4 times what the Asian Development Bank will lend in a year. So, we are not yet there, but this is growing, and bit by bit, it's gaining a scale. And scale really matters. Something that Martin was saying, and I could not support more, is that we are all for integrity in carbon markets. I mean, this is in the DNA of UNEP. I mean, we don't sell emissions, we don't buy emissions, we don't trade, we don't make money out of this. So integrity is really what matters to us. Integrity without scale doesn't cut it. And of course, the scale without integrity doesn't cut it either. But scale has to be there. So where can we see scale coming in the next decade? One is Article 6, and particularly 6.2. We see action here. Some numbers that you see on the screen, for example, the countries planning to purchase ITMOs, yes, I know, I give it. It has a wide variation, anything between 2 and 1.5 gigatons. But even a middle range, would still be something that we will notice by 2030. And as the NDCs every 5 years are updated, we expect Article 6, particularly 6.2, to actually show good demand. CORSIA is another market in which nature has a major role to play. Later in one of the panels, we will have Juan Carlos Arredondo, who may be in the room, probably, yeah, one of the best experts I know. He will be talking about CORSIA. I would say by 2027, somewhere there, we would expect about 200 million tons of demand from airlines through CORSIA, all of them with corresponding adjustments. And just to make it clear, going back to this slide, what you see here will also come with corresponding adjustments, meaning countries will need to deduct those emissions from the NDC. Okay? So here you see that happening. You go to CORSIA, you see that happening as well. Some people say that the supply crunch here may not really come because of lack of eligible credits, but actually because of corresponding adjustments. We will see what really happens. But again, in the next less than 24 months, you see another 200 million tons being demanded. And now we go to voluntary carbon markets. And here is where probably we could see one of the strongest demand for nature-based credits. I'm sure you have seen estimations of growth by 2050. They can vary, I know, but there is a consensus. And I will also show some signals that this will grow. It will be unlikely that you don't see significant growth coming in the next 20 years. And this is part of the reasons why at UNEP we believe that yes, there is capacity to grow. Let me take some time to go over this graph. The first big message is that supply is tightening, and that will have an impact on prices. That is this the line at the top of this graph, and what you see is that supply increasing up to 2022, and then the Guardian effect, as some people call it, really battered the market. It was a heavy hit, and the market felt it. And you see from 2022 onwards a decrease in the number of credits that were issued. Credit issuance is the line at the top. But this one here, these are credits that are retired, and they kind of held steadily, which actually gives ground to the second message over there, which is the corporates stay committed to the BCM. Nature-based solutions has been at the core of this. The volume you see in this market really comes from nature-based solutions. That was a good thing. Through that decrease of issuance, I mean, Guardian articles, they signal problems. Some of them were true. Sometimes not all projects had these kind of problems. I know projects that were really good and still suffer because of this press. But anyway, it had an effect. And this is the other part which I found really interesting. This is the offtake transactions that happened in the last 12 months. So this is not about the present. This is the future. These are emissions that will be traded at some point in the future. And what you see there is a significant increase. So we should see a greater volume of activity in the market coming in the next 5 years. I'm getting nearer the end, but before we conclude, well, there are a few more slides, but this is something that I find really interesting and actually very, well, a good sign. The market has not been static. Sometimes when I read articles in the press, you get the impression that from 2022 nothing changed. That the market continues to be sort of, a big volume of junk credits being traded, but that's not the case. What you see in this graph, these are the credits retired. I mean, these are buyers. What you see is that, and in colors, you can see the different, this is coming from Silvera, and this is an analysis of the quality of carbon credits. So for those of you in the back, these colors from green to gray, these are the different type of integrity, so to speak. Okay, the lower you get, the worse the carbon credit, the more hot air you may expect to find. And what you see is that in the last 3 years, actually from 2022, the market has reacted, and buyers, in this case, buyers are buying things that are of better quality. They don't buy junk. I mean, buyers have learned or are learning how to behave in this market. And here you see something. We will have Merrill from the ICBCM. The ICBCM, the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Markets, had played a critical role in signaling where quality is. And the market, which again I say is not static, has reacted to that. And part is that it's willing to pay a premium. CCP credits, core carbon principle credits, carry a premium price, meaning you have to pay more for them. And the same is happening on the supply side. What project developers are bringing to the market with time is getting of better quality. And you may say, well, true, but we still have things that are, at least in theory, this is also from Silvera, at least in theory, are of dubious qualities. Yes, true, but keep in mind that it takes time from taking a decision to start a carbon project until you get to the market. What you see is also a time lag, but at least so far, also a clear tendency. And on the left, what you see is, this is from Calix Global. This is another credit rating agency. Is that CCP credits are definitely towards the high quality end of the market. I thought I was going that it was going to be required to make this case, but again, looking at what Singapore has been doing, what Martin presenting the title of this event, actually I think I can skip over this. Definitely it's not a binary choice. That was one of the main messages of the first slide. We basically don't make it unless nature is part of the solution. And probably this is what I would like you to retain after this presentation. Not so much the volumes or the prices, but it's very, very likely that without actions that include nature, well, it's just a matter of time whether we hit a really dangerous tipping point sometime in the next 25 years, 40 years. And finally, I will close with this slide. I hear very often when I give these presentations, yes, carbon markets are not a silver bullet. That's fine. Anyway, in this business, there are no silver bullets anyway. Carbon market was not going to be one of them. I'm running out of time, but UNEP, this is what UNEP is doing. And I think that for many of you that also provide support, these are the things that we believe we should concentrate. Support to Article 6, country capacity to trade in Article 6, application of high integrity methodologies, continue increasing the integrity of the voluntary carbon market. As Martin was saying, scale without integrity, again, is not productive. Helping countries navigate and actually incorporate high integrity in their own carbon market schemes. And finally, supporting as much as needed. Some companies have a lot of capacity, they don't need support. Some others may want to navigate this with in consultation, but basically is in terms of navigating high integrity carbon markets. That's something that we see as critically important, and also support development of mitigation policies. What do you want to buy? What is a good portfolio? What is a good mix? How to make sure that your investment carries the highest value for money. Thank you so much.